Hello everyone, so this is our first flip lesson we're going to try out. It's all on digestion, structure, and function. We're going to start off with the big main idea here, and the main idea is why we eat. We eat in order to get nutrients from our food. We take these big macromolecules and we're going to be changing them down into our, get a little pen going, into our main monomers. So when we have starch, we break that down into glucose. Our protein, we're going to be breaking it down into our amino acids. And our fats and lipids, we're going to be breaking down into glycerol and fatty acids. As you can see with our wonderful turkey dinner, with meeting all the food groups, they're going to be breaking down in order to fuel all the processes that are happening in our body. Okay, so we're going to talk about the pathway, and it starts off, as you guys know, when you take the food, we're putting it in our mouth, and there's a couple of different things that can happen there. First of all, we have physical digestion. The whole point of this is teeth is to crush and grind and break apart our food into smaller pieces, so we're going to increase surface area. And the main reason why we want to increase this surface area is for our chemical digestion to occur. So this is where salivary amylase, if you guys took Chemistry 11 last year when we did our bubblegum lab, we broke down some of the gum, some of the sugars in there because of our saliva. So the salivary amylase, what this one does is it starts to break down carbohydrates. So one thing that you need to know for sure is that carbohydrate digestion starts in the mouth. None of the other macromolecules are going to be able to be broken down here. So what happens is we have our starch. Amylose is another name, and it gets broken down into maltose by salivary amylase. And maltose will end up being broken down again later into glucose. So maltose is just going to be a disaccharide of glucose. Okay, so once we leave the mouth, it's going to be moistened now because of our saliva, and now we call this bolus. So this is the food once it's been moistened, and we are going to swallow it. In order to do that, we have our tongue, which is a muscle, and it's going to push that bolus down our esophagus. And epiglottis is going to be a little flap that covers our trachea so we don't swallow our food down our windpipe. I'm sure some of you people have done that, and you start to choke, and then it's awkward for everybody around you when you have to get the Heimlich. So the bolus is going to travel down the esophagus, and it doesn't happen by gravity. It's a thin tube, muscular tube that the food won't fit down very easily. So what happens, as you can see over on the left here, is peristalsis, it's called. So what happens is circular muscle contractions start pushing and forcing that food down the tube. I don't know a way to think of it. You can think of when something stalls, it stops for a little bit. So each time it would stop if there wasn't a muscular contraction coming behind it. So the very last thing that it's going to go through before the stomach is there's a little barricade, a gate, which is called a sphincter, and all it is muscles that are going to contract to prevent food from coming back up and opening to allow food to go in. Next part we're looking at is the stomach. This is going to be muscular, and it is lined with mucus. The whole reason why it's lined with mucus is we have HCl, hydrochloric acid, in our stomach that has a low pH, and it would eat away at our stomach wall if we didn't have mucus. Also, we have in the gastric juice, in addition to the HCl, are enzymes. The main one that we care about is going to convert pepsinogen into pepsin. So pepsinogen is just a precursor of an enzyme, not active until HCl is around, and then it will turn into pepsin, which starts to break down protein. All the different steps of protein breakdown we'll go over next day when we talk about enzymes. But first of all that happens is the proteins change into our polypeptides in the stomach, and eventually they'll be broken down into peptides and amino acids in the small intestine. So this is, as we were just saying, protein digestion is going to start here. So there's none in the stomach, none in the mouth. It doesn't start until the stomach. No fats have still been broken down, and no carbohydrate digestion is going to be in the stomach. Just as we had the bolus having a name once it leaves the mouth, we're going to have the name being chyme, and that's the new name for the food once it's left the stomach and it enters through enters the small intestine through another sphincter called the pyloric. So those were our two sphincters so far. Once we get into the small intestine, that's where all of the rest of the digestion of molecules is completed. So the carbohydrates, which at this stage was maltose because it had been broken down in the mouth already, that's going to be broken down into glucose. And here is where our polypeptides continue to be broken down into peptides, which is just more than one amino acid, and then finally into amino acids. And then our lipids are broken down into our 3 fatty acids again, like we were talking about, and our glycerol. And they're all absorbed. So this is the big part. Nothing else is, none of the monomers are absorbed anywhere else besides the small intestine. We have pancreatic juice because when we have our pH coming from our stomach of 2.5, it doesn't work out very well in the small intestines for 2 reasons. One, it doesn't have mucus, so no mucus. So we need to have that basic pH. And also is that the enzymes in the small intestine want a pH of 8 in order to be activated properly, whereas some, like in the stomach, need that low pH. We have these protrusions of the small intestine called villi, or villus for one of them. And what it is it's increased coils or finger-like projections, and what it does is it increases the surface area. This is where all the absorption takes place. So the more surface area, so maybe I should spell it right, absorption, the more surface area equals more absorption. So the 2 things that are actually absorbed into the blood is glucose and amino acid, whereas the fat byproducts or monomers are going to be absorbed actually into the lymphatic system. All this stuff we'll see in a little bit more detail, but those are the big differentiation. Make sure you know that this part is going to go to the lymphatic system, whereas glucose and amino acids will be absorbed directly into the blood. So the last thing that we're going to go through before we're done here is the large intestine. So this is where water is going to be absorbed back into the blood. So if, for example, we have too much water being absorbed, this is where it gets really uncomfortable and you get constipated. So reason for this would be lack of fiber in your diet. If there's lack of fiber, lack of solids, lack of solutes, the water is going to want to flow through osmosis into the blood instead of staying in there. Or if you get nervous or the muscles start contracting too rapidly, it's not enough time for the water to be absorbed. And so what happens, too much water is going to go out with your feces. I guess we could say too little is absorbed. So if too little absorbed, that's going to lead to diarrhea. And I'm pretty sure I spelled that wrong. Last thing, rectum. This is where we're going to have the storage of feces. And just while it's waiting to be excreted, and it gets excreted out, the 3rd sphincter that we're going to talk about, the muscles, circular muscles that are going to contract, and this will leave through the anus, and then that'll be it. Remind me to tell you a joke about the rectum, because it might be inappropriate for anybody else listening. Okay, so to finish off, our big summary we want to know is the macromolecules, and mostly where are they digested, and then also where are they stored, or absorbed. So all are absorbed in the small intestine, and if you look at the starch and proteins and the fats is all SI, protein is stomach and the small intestine, and the starches is the mouth and the small intestine. Okay, so there we go. There's our first lesson. So make sure you fill out your summary and the questions that you may have, and then when we come to class on Friday, there will be some activities to help us get some of the stuff into our head. Okay, thank you very much. Have a wonderful help. Hope this helps.